Jim Jordan is a lousy strongman. Oops, they did it again. On Tuesday, the House Republican Gong Show once again failed to choose a new Speaker of the House. This time it was one of the conference's most belligerent hardliners, Jim Jordan, who got smacked down, falling a whopping 17 votes short of a majority on the first round of voting. Things got worse on Wednesday when he lost even more support in a second round of voting, and there was no sign he would do any better in any further rounds. Fingers crossed. Mr. Jordan's failure to seize the gavel would be a good thing for all Americans, most definitely including responsible Republican lawmakers. His belly flop set off a flurry of anxious speculation about what next. Will he cut the mother of all deals with enough GOP holdouts to drag himself over the finish line? Will a dark horse alternative candidate emerge? Will Kevin McCarthy rise from the dead like some congressional Nosferatu? Will the winsomely bow-tied Patrick McHenry serve as Speaker pro tem forever? I don't know what to think, lamented James Comer, a Jordan backer, as he fled the floor on Tuesday. Eventually, one assumes, a new speaker will emerge. But the entire circus has already laid bare the dark flaw at the heart of this Congress: the Republican conference is failing as a democratic entity. A healthy democracy needs its participants to accept a basic will of the majority model. Fringe factions have rights, but they do not run the show. For years, the Republican Party has been shifting toward an anti-majoritarian, burn-down-the-system ethos. Time after time, the preferences and well-being of the many are abandoned in pursuit of the desires of the extremist few. Nowhere has this become more evident than in the House, where various slivers of hardliners delight in holding the entire chamber, and on occasion the entire country, hostage. The Freedom Caucusers want this or that unpopular policy stuffed into a spending bill. Matt Gaetz's rebels clamor for this or that procedural change. In some cases, the Venn diagram circles of demands overlap; in others, different gangs dig in on different priorities. Forget compromise or collaboration or collective governance within the conference. It is not even a question of might makes right so much as a contest to see who can grab the most attention for throwing the most disruptive tantrum. As a community slides ever deeper into chaos and dysfunction, it becomes less suitable for democratic leadership and more primed for domination by a political strongman. Its weary members often become more open to the charms of players who display the tenacity and ruthlessness to impose order on the feuding clans. For a while now, House Republicans, much like large swaths of the party's electorate, have seemed headed in this direction. For all his storied political savvy, the recently defenestrated Mr. McCarthy failed to grasp how far his side had devolved from the political era in which he joined the House in 2007. Trying his hand at old-school coalition building, he cut deals with and empowered his fringiest members in the hopes of earning their goodwill. All he wound up fueling was their rage and contempt. Mr. Jordan clearly fancies himself more of a Trumpian strongman. He has never been a leader or a serious legislator but is, rather, a career pugilist who seems developmentally stuck in his glory days as a high school and college wrestler. When nominating him on the House floor Tuesday, Elise Stefanik, one of the more painful cautionary tales about the corrosiveness of Trumpism, felt compelled to cite his mad skills on the wrestling mat. Seriously? The guy is pushing 60, and we're still yammering about his teenage takedowns? And not to be indelicate, but do Republicans really want people thinking all that hard about Mr. Jordan's wrestling baggage? Mr. Jordan attempted a different route to the top. Whatever shiny promises he may have made to colleagues, his speaker campaign has relied heavily on intimidation. His supporters, including outside groups and media figures like Sean Hannity, ran a hard-edge pressure campaign, looking to rally the party's base against Republicans who stood in Mr. Jordan's way. This is not a minor threat. In the age of Trump, Republicans targeted by the MAGAverse have learned to fear not only for their political fortunes but also for the safety of themselves and their families. Such bullying undoubtedly suits Mr. Jordan's self-conception. But it seems unlikely he, or much of anyone in his conference, has what it takes to be a genuine strongman. A garden-variety thug, maybe. But his leverage and influence, like so many hardliners, largely derive from being a creature of Mr. Trump. Mr. Jordan may consider himself a powerful figure. In reality, he is just another Trumpian lapdog, albeit an especially currish one. This is one of the ironies of today's Republican Party. So many of the folks who see themselves as having the Trump-like will and strength to lead are little more than slavish followers of the MAGA king. Generally speaking, toadies don't make for great strongmen. Small wonder that the House's Republican leaders in recent years have been so weak and forgettable. Last week, Mike Collins, a Georgia Republican, summed up the absurdity and tragedy of his conference's situation on social media: "We should just have a lottery. If you lose, you have to be speaker." Yes, he was joking, and his suggestion sounds absurdly random. But it also may be more democratic, and likely to produce a better outcome than the road House Republicans have been headed down of late. Jim Jordan is a lousy strongman. Oops, they did it again. On Tuesday, the House Republican gong show once again failed to choose a new Speaker of the House. This time it was one of the conference's most belligerent hardliners, Jim Jordan, who got smacked down, falling a whopping 17 votes short of a majority on the first round of voting. Things got worse on Wednesday when he lost even more support in a second round of the strange decline of the Pax Americana. When Hamas attacked Israel, Republicans knew whom to blame: President Biden. Donald Trump asserted that the attack wouldn't have happened if he were still in the White House. Mike Pence, while condemning Trump for praising Hezbollah and Hamas, asserted that Biden was somehow endangering U.S. interests by projecting weakness. Like much of what the American right says these days, these smears were both vile and infantile. No, the U.S. president isn't like the Green Lantern, able to shape world events through sheer force of will. And Biden has in fact taken remarkably tough positions on foreign affairs, much more so than his predecessor. More generally, it's striking how both the far left, which has no significant influence on the Democratic Party, and the far right, which largely runs the GOP, are American solipsists. They blame U.S. leaders for everything bad that happens in the world, denying foreigners any agency. That said, even serious students of international affairs are noting that the world seems to be becoming more dangerous, with many local Cold Wars turning hot and suggesting that we may be witnessing the end of the Pax Americana, the long era in which U.S. economic and military dominance limited the potential for wars of conquest. But why is the Pax Americana in decline? You might be tempted to engage in economic determinism, saying that the United States has lost influence because it doesn't dominate the world economy the way it once did. But while there was a big decline in America's share of world GDP between 1960 and 1980, since then that share hasn't had a clear downward trend, although it has fluctuated with the foreign exchange value of the dollar. Indeed, our strong recovery from the COVID recession, combined with the stumbles of some geopolitical rivals,